This video is all about a Krick model boat steam plant in very bad condition. Before I am able to quote a price for a steam engine repair or rebuild job, I need to perform a preliminary inspection to assess the condition of the parts. In this video, I show the process and the outcome. Quite a lot of the jobs I do start with an email. If the job sounds feasible, I reply to the email and request some photographs. The unboxing, with a health and safety warning. Using a professionally sharpened high carbon steel Roman gladius sword like the one that you're about to see is not recommended, as it is extremely sharp and in the wrong hands could be extremely dangerous. You may be wondering why I have such a thing in my house. To be honest, I wonder that myself. I bought it in the first place out of curiosity. I have a collection of battle axes and Roman gladius swords, a very modest collection. This one is okay, it's the smaller of the two that I have, but it's more manageable, and I had this professionally sharpened when I bought it. And why did I do that? This sword is made of high carbon steel, and it's not to be confused with the toy swords that you hang on the wall that are decorative. This is a real one, and in the right hands could be exceedingly dangerous. The first thing I did when I bought this sword was to touch the sharp point on the end, which immediately caused my finger to bleed profusely. I'm only using it to open this package just for a bit of fun. The small Stanley knife on the bench is more than sharp enough to do this job. All this sword is a heavy 3-foot long version of a Stanley knife. Yes, it's that sharp. On both sides and on the tip. For now, I'm going to replace the sword in its sheath and do the rest of the job manually. Inside the box was this case, which probably at one time contained a radio control transmitter. It's a good way of packing things though, because the engine and the boiler arrived in perfect condition. In the bottom of the box were various other pieces of ancillary equipment, including a spirit level. I don't really know what that's for. By this stage, I'd already seen some good quality photographs of the engine and boiler, and just from the photographs I did mention that it didn't look good and it may be an expensive job. My hourly rate for what I do is quite low. In fact, it's the same rate as a gardener cutting some trees down in the garden next door. The first thing I want to know is whether the pressure gauge works, and the last thing I'm going to do is pressurize this boiler to a high pressure because it's horrible. I have connected a compressed air line to the boiler at a low air pressure of only 20 pounds per square inch, just to test the functionality of the pressure gauge. You must never pressurize an unknown boiler before you perform a hydraulic test to twice the working pressure. A hydraulic test, of course, means pumping up the boiler pressure using water, which, if the boiler fails, will not explode. You'll just get a bit wet. The first thing that is apparent is the state of the cladding. This boiler has been extremely hot at some time. When messing about on the water with radio-controlled steamboats, it's a really good idea to fit an extra servo operating a gas cut-off valve, because if you run out of water in the middle of the lake, the boat will stop, and all you can do is sit on the bank watching a potential Viking funeral. The good news is the pressure gauge works. I put some WD-40 in the safety valve and pulled the end bit up and down, and that also works, but I'm really concerned about the depth of thread from all the connectors into the top of the boiler. There are only about 3 threads engaging when you tighten the parts up. This is not looking good. Here I'll show you what I mean. I'm putting the plug back in the top of the boiler, and bear in mind that these fittings are the only thing that holds the inner boiler in place. Just for the record, because of the condition of this boiler, I've already decided not to take on this job. I charge a fee of £50 for a thorough examination of anything that I'm about to work on, and if I do work on it, then that is refunded. If I don't work on it, it's just a flat fee of £50. Plus insured postage back to the owner. Everything I'm looking at on this boiler is just no good at all. Something is definitely wrong. It cannot have left the factory like this. I'm starting to put all the parts in a plastic box so I don't lose them. Before I remove the water gauge, which is also covered in limescale, I'm sort of potentially thinking about a fix. What I could do is tighten the boiler band, which I would have to shorten to do this, and then cut around it to get rid of the charred part at the bottom. Before removing the water gauge from the boiler, to take the inner boiler out of the shell, I thought I'd have a look at the engine. Here it is, bone dry. So I'm going to oil every moving part before I even think about running it. This engine looks very similar to Wilesco. I don't have too much interest in engines like this, but I'm sure some viewers will be experts and tell me they were probably made in the same factory. This is a Krick engine and Wilesco's are slightly different. In this clip I'm pumping some oil into the inlet pipe using a short piece of plastic tubing. This engine hasn't been run for a long time and all of the moving parts are very dry. I'm also filling the oil cups on the steam chests. When I first admitted the compressed air it was a bit sluggish, but then it started to pick up. In this part of the clip I'm applying some oil to the top of the steam chests. These are piston valves and as you can see they're actually leaking, nothing new there. But at least it works. I soon stopped the engine and re-oiled every part again. The engine is surprisingly powerful, but the main bearings are worn because the oil is just running straight through. This steam plant has been removed from a Krick Victoria model steamboat. I can't help but wonder whether the cremation of the boiler melted part of the hull, because a Krick Victoria has an ABS hull. This engine is more than powerful enough to move a Krick Victoria through the water at quite a good speed. I've never seen a model steamboat actually using one of these engine and boiler combinations. Normally a Krick Victoria would use a Cheddar Models plant or a Graham Industries TVR-1A engine. Basically the engine sort of runs okay. I'm sure under steam you would see it leaking steam from various places and it needs a good clean, but it is at least serviceable. Unlike the boiler, here I'm removing the pressure gauge. I'm doing this just to show how the boiler is held into the brass casing. Not very securely with such short threads on the fittings. And the steam outlet boiler bush is not straight. Time now to remove the water gauge, and this proved to be quite difficult. The gauge would not push through the top fitting because it's so full of limescale. But luckily by rotating the lower fitting I could get the glass out sideways and I didn't break it. Everything was going quite well until we had a power cut. I thought, oh well, it'll come back on in a minute or two, but no. Over 4 hours later the power was restored, and during this time it gave me time to think what life would be like without the internet. The human race is so very dependent on the internet, a little bit too much so I think. With the power back on I could continue. This is the inner boiler, which is made from copper. It's not even a piece of tube, it's just a riveted shell. It's full of limescale at one side and evidence of repair, and particularly on the other side definitely evidence of repair. And here you can see one of the problems. I always think it's a bit of a pain having to take things apart for a boiler test, but then again you don't know what's underneath the cladding. This boiler, in my opinion, is completely unserviceable. I would not want to give it a hydraulic test, and I certainly would not want to steam it. The state of this boiler is not good news for the owner, but he did mention that he might just do some cosmetic repair on it to put back in the boat. Personally, I know where I'd put it. and I really hope that the owner does not attempt to put this thing back together and steam it. The only good thing to come out of this episode is that the owner originally bought the boat, complete with this steam plant, for a very low price. Stay safe, stay healthy, thanks for watching, and I hope you found it useful. Please take the time to visit my main Steam Models website and click on the section of the website that says Video Playlists. And by doing that, you can find other videos that you may like to watch. And by using the playlists, you can actually watch the videos back to back.